Okay, so in this video, I'm going to take a look at the ggplot2 textbook here, authored by Hadley Wickham, Daniel Navarro, and Thomas Lynn Pedersen. And we're going to set it up in Google Colab. And the Colab is going to be, the runtime is going to default to R. And that's important because it avoids us having to set out load extension RP2 IPython magic command, right? So just to see that, if we control V and Colab to R, that will bring us into a Colab where the runtime, if we check the notebook settings, the runtime is R, not Python, right? And then if we want to load in ggplot2, right, we could go down here to the introduction and follow the guidance here, install packages, and then use the library command in R to make those available in the Colab environment. Now I'm going, because tidyverse comes preloaded, if we check for a moment the libraries that are available are preloaded here in the Google Colab, you'll see we have ggplot2, we'll have dplyr, we'll have tidyverse, and there's a little bit of latency because I was connecting to the server. But if I run down here and check the libraries or the packages that have already been installed, dplyrs there, we have ggplot2, we have tidyr, knitr, modelr, and we should have tidyverse as well. If I come down a little bit further, we should see tidy. So the tidyverse suite is already there. Easily install and load the tidyverse. Okay, so if I want to make it available in this environment, we'll just go library, open bracket, tidyverse, and then just execute. Okay, and it just takes a second, but it loads in quite quickly. We've ggplot2, tibble, tidyr, reader, per, dplyr, stringer, forcats. Now, to get started here, first steps, I'm not going to install all those, but you could. I'm just going to go straight to the MPG dataset and pull that out of the ggplot2. Now, because we've loaded in ggplot2 already, if I just go MPG and execute, the full dataset appears. And if we use the dplyr syntax, or we could just use base R, str MPG, we'll get an overview of what's in our data set, right? And that's quite convenient. And of course, we could, another verb here is glimpse and open bracket MPG and take a look. And it's a small data set. It's just 234 rows, 11 columns. So this is really a tiny data set. And if you look at it, we can see the information that's contained in there relates to the manufacturer, the model of car, the engine size in terms of liters, so 1.82, so on, year the car was released, the number of cylinders, 4, 6, and I think 8. The transmission, so auto, manual, the drive, front wheel, rear wheel, and four-wheel drives, the fuel efficiency in the city, MPG, so miles per gallon in the city and on the highway, the fuel type, petrol, diesel, electric, and then we have class, so we have different classes of vehicle relating to the size and the function of the vehicle, right? So, okay, we've MPG, the data set, we've looked at it from different prisms. Let's do a little bit of coding. Now, again, if I look here at the introduction, there is some introduction I advise you to read, and there's a few verbs here that we'll be using. I'm going to just dive straight in and bring up a graph. So I'll just copy this snippet of code here. And what I want to look at, if we Control V, I want to read in the NPG dataset. On the x-axis, put in the size of engine in terms of liters. On the y-axis, the fuel efficiency. What we can see here is that there's a negative relationship between the engine size, number of liters, and the highway efficiency, right? But then we have an anomaly here, or aberration. There's a few vehicles that seem to have very large engine size and high fuel efficiency. And again, we could try to identify those. So if we come down a little bit further and load in, so again, it's a very similar syntax. I'll just copy directly here, use copied and paste in, Control V. And you can see there is something going on. These vehicles here are actually two-seaters, right? So if we just blow that up a little bit, you can see the red dots here denote the two-seater. So they're more fuel efficient because they're small, right? They're small vehicles, they're probably sports vehicles. And that's why we're getting that extra fuel efficiency. Also very powerful and very useful is the facet wrap. Let's just put that in there, Control V. And it's the same graph again as what we have here. But what we're going to do is pull apart for each of the separate classes. So rather than color, we're going to separate out different classes using facet wrap, and that'll produce a number of graphs here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we've 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 graphs. We've produced a separate graph for each class. And again, that's very nice because we can see, broadly speaking, the negative relationship that we would normally anticipate in terms of the engine size and the fuel efficiency is fairly clear there. We can improve on that. We could put through, but maybe before I add in a smooth out or put a pattern through the data here. Well, okay, let's just do that. I'll take copy. One very nice thing we could do here and is available in the ggplot suite is there a trend line, right? Or can we observe some kind of pattern in the data? And we're linking the engine size to the fuel efficiency. And what we observe is, yes, it is negative. And probably when we go a little bit further along, we've a smaller number of observations, but the trend is being pulled up, right, a little bit. So we're slightly disbelieving what's going on there. But again, if we link it back to our understanding that these are probably smaller vehicles, we can see where the fuel efficiency is coming from. The smaller car, the bigger engine size, we're still getting higher fuel efficiency. Okay, so that's interesting. And we can do more type of graphing here. I'm going to pull in a little bit of graphing in terms of not just doing a facet wrap, right? But using a facet grid. So just Control V. So before we had run this graph, let's just, we'll get rid of this for a moment and make it more direct comparison. And before we had produced a graph based on using a facet wrap to pull out the separate classes into different graphs. Now, this time I'm going to use a facet grid instead of facet wrap, but otherwise the syntax is the same. So for instance, if I remove, just compare, it's the same basic syntax and the same ggplot2, the data is MPG. We're going to use a geom plot, and we're going to use the aesthetic of on the x-axis display, on the y-axis highway, miles per gallon on the highway. Instead of using a facet wrap, I'm going to use a facet grid. Let's just compare the effect of that. Okay, so what we get here is, again, we're getting our graphs, but this time we're saying, look, we want to create a class where we link the drive. So we have four-wheel drive, forward wheel drive, and rear wheel drive, and we have cylinders 4, 5, 6, and 8. Now we could do it the other way around. We could have put it a cylinder here, so CYL squiggle, and run, and we would see a transpose of our graphs then. So we have the cylinders 4, 5, 6, and 8 on the vertical here, and then the drive then four-wheel drive, the forward-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive. And again, it's a nice way of putting together a graph where you can say, okay, if it's a forward-wheel drive and it's 6 cylinders, what do we have? If we have a rear-wheel drive and we have 8 cylinders, then what do we have? And we notice a little bit the rear-wheel drive is associated with a higher cylinder, so a higher number of cylinders in the engine, and so on. So some patterns then emerge, and that can be very important. We could also add a little bit of color here. So color, and I think it's OR, although Hadley Wickham allows the more anglicized spelling. And we can say a link to maybe the manufacturer. Now, maybe that's too complex, right? So we'll just try, see what happens here. And we do get, it's a bit probably overly complex, but if we had a smaller number of manufacturers, maybe we can, in looking or viewing at our data, pull out interesting patterns. Probably nothing completely jumps out. So maybe it's worthwhile reverting back to what we had. I just run again and just get rid of the manufacturer. Okay, last thing we might note, if I had taken this line here, copy selection, and just had introduced here, Control V, so in changing from facet wrap to facet grid, Control V, and put cylinders relative to drive, then we get that 2 extra dimensionality in our table, and we could have put in color and so on. Okay, now my advice is go take a look at the ggplot2 textbook. It is a really nice introduction. It's very practical because you can just copy and paste into either RStudio or into a Google Colab. And also importantly here, and I'll leave the link below the video, they make reference to the cookbook here, and this is more for base R, right? So R basics, installing a package, creating a box plot, and so on. But this is using base R type syntax, and again, very powerful, very nice type of graphing also that you can do independently of ggplots, but also using ggplots, some references to ggplot here as well. And this is a more complete guide to how you might do some graphing, and it's really nice as well. So I'll leave the link to that also, and hopefully it will be of some use. And I'll save this Google Colab and leave a link also with a hyperlink below the video clip.